Hi, welcome on to ArsenalFanTV. Now, I've got with me Jon Smith again, but I'm happy to have him again. Now, I remember the last time we spoke, Jon had just released this book called The Deal. Jon, of course, is a super agent, and he opened a whole world of inside the world of a super agent. And I've got to say, Jon, the reaction we had from that interview is one of the best reactions we've ever had on ArsenalFanTV.
I'm really delighted, guys. I just wanted to tell people how it was, and it's I've been a gooner all my life, and it was just lovely to be able to talk to people and say, this is football, this is the business of football. And I remember when we were talking before, I was speaking to James Ollie, the writer, when we wrote the book, and I kept saying to him, James, this is really boring stuff. He's going, no, this is really interesting. Nobody knows this. So I said, okay, well, I'll just talk. And, I didn't want to do a book where I just pointed fingers and went, he did that and he did this. I wanted to do something which was, I think, honest and showed the supporters, because they deserve it, to know, we are growing from a sport to a business, and has its pains, has its growing pains, and there's some really interesting parts of it. And so I hope I opened up a little bit.
No, well, it's an absolutely brilliant book. First of all, if you haven't got this book yet, for Christmas, go and get it. The Deal. You don't even need a plug. It's just a brilliant book. If you want to understand how an agent works, how the world of football works, you've got to get this book. And I said, when I did the interview, and after I saw the reaction to it, it had like way over 100,000 views. And I said to myself, I've got to come back and talk to you when we're approaching the January transfer window, because we spoke sort of towards the end of the summer transfer window, the January transfer window. Now, first of all, before we get into the January transfer window, we've got two players at the moment in Alexis Sanchez and Mesut Ozil, two world-class players who've only got 18 months left on their contract. Practically every single day, there's speculation in the newspapers about them being wanted in China. This club wants them, that club wants them. They're holding the club to ransom. The club won't. But it's just, for fans, it's horrible, right? We want to know, why is this? Why have we let it run down to 18 months? Or is this the usual standard thing? And will they sign? That's the other thing. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, you're not going to know definitely if they're going to sign. But what have you made of it all? Is this standard stuff?
Well, actually, I did a little bit of homework. Excuse me a second.
Brilliant.
Because the list is quite exhaustive. So I wrote down and had a look at some contracts and things. Coming out as well within 18 months are Giroud, Ospina, Wilshere. Don't understand why we didn't do a deal with him before he went to Bournemouth. Yeah. Gibbs, Cazorla, Mertesacker, and yet we've contracted Bellerin. So there is a plan somewhere, and that's a lot of players coming out.
Why, Jon, of all of these guys, we reach in like this 18-month stage? Why?
Well, part of it is, I think, the uncertainty of Arsene. And I think that's playing a role, both sides, both for the club and for the players themselves. I don't think it's particularly the elephant in the room, but it's there. And I think what is going to happen is Arsenal are going to have to make a fairly concerted effort. I mean, 18 months is about the yardstick of where you want to be done by. You don't really, because the values of the players now start to drop. So if we were to say, well, we're going to sell, if it's not going to work with Sanchez, then we'll sell him. You'll get 30 million as opposed to 80 million. So there's a big disparity as that contract runs down. And then as January ticks by, everyone's focus is obviously winning, doing, being, and then the summer window, and then you're under pressure. So I'd be very surprised if Arsenal didn't move in the coming weeks and months. As an agent, the longer it goes on for, the better it is for the agent. It just makes it that much, that pendulum sort of edges towards you. 2 years is a nice time. 2 years is a nice time to swing it out. But I think at the time, Arsenal were unsure about where the manager was.
So you think the manager, the fact that he hasn't signed yet, has got a lot to do with this, where players are thinking to themselves, well, hold on a minute, I'm not sure. I mean, who's going to be the next manager? Who's going to be... They don't know the future plan.
I think that's certainly a sizable part of it. I don't think it's the be-all and end-all, and I would be very surprised. I think Ozil will sign.
Yeah.
I hope he does as a fan, but I think he will. I think he's in a good place in terms of where the negotiations are, from what little I understand of what's going on there. Sanchez is interesting, and I don't think. So I don't think, I'll say this looking at the camera, I don't think Sanchez wants to go. That's not to say he won't. And the 400,000 that may or may not be in China is a big call, because it's a different lifestyle, it's a different league, and it's distant. You're off real watch, you're on over there watch. So and if it was me, Arsenal can afford it, they might as well do it. And there's ways you can configure the deal. You don't just have to hand him that's the price and that's what he's going to get every week.
What ways?
Well, there are the obvious place is image rights, and there's workable transactions with sponsors, and Arsenal have got enough clout with the sponsors, and it may just be that's part of the length of the negotiation, that they may need the sponsors to buy in at certain levels, in certain ways, to use certain players for certain things. It's not all wrapped around image rights, although it's wrapped around what the player does with his image. So does that sound a bit strange? It is image rights, but the player can go beyond that in terms of his own personal sponsorship as well, which is home-based. So there are ways that you can configure that so that £300,000 a week doesn't actually cost you £300,000 a week, and it can be phased, and it can be bonus. We talked about this last time. There are bonuses for actually playing. Not that you wouldn't play Sanchez, but and you don't want the bonuses. By the way, you don't want the bonuses to be based around too much about just playing, because otherwise, if you get injured, the player might want to push himself back. Yeah. So that he gets, and it's a bit too early. So you have to phase those into medical reports. It's a complex set of negotiations. And if I was the agent, I'd be sitting there saying, "Okay, come on me, come talk to me. There's my number."
Sounds like exactly what this guy's doing.
Which is fine. He doesn't have to do much more. But there comes a point when Arsenal have to, and I'm sure they are, will have to engage in a slightly more constructive conversation, and maybe they are, because I'm not party to that conversation. I'd be surprised if the boys didn't sign. That's not to say they won't, not to say they will rather, but I think they will, and that I think part of it is Arsenal have to balance out, because they've got so many coming out, who the ones that they want and what may happen. I mean, you're looking at players like Jenkinson, who I think may well go out on loan in January. Debussy might be one as well. I think he's carrying an injury at the moment, so he's probably not going to be.
He got a hamstring, didn't he?
Yeah, but that's 6 weeks, so he should be eligible for February or end of January. So I think I'd see those two probably going out on loan. What else would Arsenal do in the window? Possibly right back. Can't see very much else. I think they did what they did in the summer. I think they're bedding it down. I think they need to get Mustafi back. What have we done? We've not kept a clean sheet since he's been out, I think.
Yeah.
So they probably need him back. And ultimately, I think Mertesacker is an interesting one, because you need a dominant voice in the back four. Koscielny's a very good player. I'm not sure. I think he's becoming a dominant voice. So I think, but his age obviously is sizably against him. So I think they've got a series of negotiations, and they probably put them in category A, B, and C, and they'll work through them. I'd be again hopeful that by the time we got to the end of the season, 3 or 4 of these would have been done.
All right, your agent to not Ozil or Sanchez, your agent now to Giroud, or your agent to one of the other players, right? You see that Sanchez and Ozil get their deals done, 200 grand a week plus. Giroud's deal's coming up on that. You go and say, well, hold on a minute. All right, maybe I'm not quite as good as them, but acting as his agent, we want now 180, 190. Is this one of the reasons why Arsenal are worried about paying so much money to 2 players?
Yes, of course. It could become a bun fest.
I mean, if you was the agent, would you be then going in after that to try and get that sort of money for your client?
I think I'd like to be a little bit cleverer. I'd probably want to knock on the door now and say, no, I know you're doing with these guys and you've got those waiting around the corner. We want to stay, but we do want this. We don't want what he's got, but we want it here. and I try and create it in a way that I can get it really high with bonuses, certain image rights, which, and we talked about this before. The revenue will only allow 16.66% of the contract to be configured as legitimate image rights. But there are ways that you can involve sponsorship deals inside transfer deals, is what I was just alluding to just now. And I want to create a package with Arsenal that shows that I'm wanting to be there. If it doesn't work out, it would hurt them more if I walked out in 6 weeks' time. Went, you know what, guys, I tried, but you just, you're not interested. Go and sort.
You've got to drive a hard bargain, don't you?
Yeah, I think you got to. But you know what? You do it sometimes, as opposed to just sitting there and going, "That's what I want." Sometimes if you go in there with a smile and go, "You know what? I'd like to stay, but I want that. Actually, I want a bit more. I want that really." So let's see how you can help me get there. And if that doesn't work, then you back off and go, "Okay, thanks very much." No, the answer's no. It's all right. We'll just run it down for a while. We'll see how you go with the others. But I'd want to be on the front foot, not on the back foot.
Arsenal have had this legendary wage structure for ages. Tottenham have it as well, and it's been working quite well for them. But is the time coming when that's going to be all over? The players now, you want to keep a Sanchez, you have to pay the market rate, right? These guys are being offered money from China, £500,000 a week. We've seen Oscar going from Chelsea for ridiculous money. Graziano Pella.
Really young guy. That's right. He's 25, Oscar. Yeah, the first, and they are bringing their age. It's not like the MLS used to be. Well, we'll go for someone's coming to the end of their career. We'll go for another Lampard. They're going for the younger guys.
Is this a serious threat to the Premier League, to clubs like Arsenal?
Oh yes, of course. And everything's got to be measured in what happens next.
Yeah.
We are the most successful. I've said this so many times now. The most successful sport on the planet. Outside of sex, the biggest entertainment on the planet. I think I've used that line before somewhere. But there are just little concerns out there in the ether. One, BT's viewing figures are, I think, vaguely north of chronic. It's not great. And people are not buying that package now. They're saying, well, I'll have that game, maybe that game. A lot of people around the world are picking up IPTV, so they're not paying for it at all. I think China's EPL rights will go for big money next time around. As in, I keep going on about India. I think India is the next giant out there. Soccer's really catching on. It's because of social media. It's driving that audience. So India will be very big, and I think Rupert Murdoch has, as ever, been very clever. He's now selling Sky to a bigger entity that he owns to give him more cash to play with. So I am hopeful that football will continue to have a very sizable financial feast around itself beyond this next set of negotiations. The interesting player, and again we've kicked this around a little bit in the past, is what are the tech companies, what are the chatter companies going to do? So at the moment, we play Man City on Sunday, and you and I have a chat about it, and my mates talk about it, and everyone talks about it. And by Monday, Tuesday, it's sort of yesterday, and we're moving on. Around the world, that chatter keeps going. So you've got 1 billion odd people talking about over 149 territories around the world, talking about this game and who does what, and it's just obsessional. And people like Facebook sit there, and they've got all that data swirling around them, which they then sell and advertise around, and they're paying a big round number for this. And it's an industry, an industry that's growing and nobody's paying for it. So I'm wondering what Facebook are going to do, because Facebook could sit there and go, well, we don't have to pay for it. Look what we got. But other platforms are starting to emerge now that are going to take that away. And Facebook have got a place where they've probably reached very close to their max audience. So now they're flying drones over Ghana and Nigeria and other African countries to uplift signals which they're not getting from some of the population there. That sounds like the last throw of the dice or the beginning of a new era where drones take over the world. But I wonder whether Zuckerberg, in his more insane moments, sits there and goes, you know what, I could throw 10 billion at this and then I've got an audience. What happened the other day? Sport Bible put on England versus Greece, a European table tennis qualifier. Who cares? Well, I suppose if you play table tennis, you care a bit. 2.3 million people turned up to watch that. Now, they only stayed 3.5 seconds on average, but they went there, which means the people watching this now are part of that audience that are going, I watch Match of the Day or Sky if it's on, maybe BT, but I can get all the entertainment and the chatter and the insights and everything else from other sites around the internet. And that's where I'm going to visit most of the time. The younger the audience, the more they're visiting those sites. So it's going to be a real dichotomy as to where this goes in the next 10 years. The only thing I will say is I don't think it's going to go south. I don't think the money's going to change dramatically. I just think the dynamics may change. So I think you've got to get used to the fact that there may well be a £200 million player, and there may be £400,000 or £500,000 a week. But if the money's gone beyond 10 billion, 12 billion, it's just commensurate. It sounds awful to people that are on £50 a week and paying tax. But that's the way, for a short while, it will go. That it will reach a glass ceiling, and it will dissipate as people begin to get their entertainment from the internet. And that will be the changing point. And that's somewhere in the next 6 years.
So, John, you know what? One of the things reading this book, right, that became so apparent to me is that you're one of the main guys behind setting up the Premier League. We wouldn't have the Premier League if it weren't... He's being modest, right? We wouldn't have the Premier League if it wasn't for the likes of you. Now, can you believe how it's taken off? Can you believe that the fact that it is the number one source of entertainment, sport entertainment around the world?
We always thought, and when I got into football as a professional as opposed to a fan, although I think you are always a fan as well as a professional, we always thought that coming off the back of the 80s where it was dreadful, I mean, there were people dying in stadia, it was just not a good place. We always thought the entertainment was great still, and it was just a question of how do we showcase it? And it just felt old-fashioned. It felt tired. It's like sometimes you go to an old hotel and you think, oh, I remember this was great. I came here as a kid. It looks a bit tired now. It was like one of those, and that's what football felt like going into the 90s. And I was one of the people involved with bringing in new sponsors, and then we had a moment, which was the 1990 World Cup, and we had Gaza, and suddenly someone lit a fuse, and by 92 we had the Premier League. And life's all about timing. It was the right time, the right moment. Did I ever think we'd see a £200 million player? No, I probably didn't. But then I didn't think we'd see, £100 million properties in London either. So it's life moves on. But I think it's been a huge success. And as I said, I think the next half a dozen years are going to be fascinating in terms of where the money comes from. But nothing's forever. I think we've got to learn to manage ourselves. And the football clubs generally, I'm not talking about Arsenal particularly now, but football clubs generally are a little bit more cautious. They're better run. They have scouting systems that are better. So the agents who were scurrying around just throwing players around at football clubs in the Premier League and Championship in particular, they're finding it harder now. The clubs tend to know where the players are, but you still need that relationship. And that's one of the reasons why I think one of the many reasons I've been supportive of Arsene Wenger, because you get someone like Jose comes in, and forget that, Ibrahimovic has done really well. A couple of his other buys haven't been quite as successful. I think Pogba's obviously still a very good player, but it hasn't quite happened for him yet. But to be able to do those deals, you actually need the connection with the right agent. You need to know how to get in there, how to mix it all up, because a lot of the agents are now aligned with clubs across Europe, and you need to know what goes on in those clubs. You need to know who Juve have got in their reserve team or in their youth team coming through that you might be able to track and work a deal with. So you need better scouting systems. And they're all working that, but the top 8, 9, 10 possibly have got sophisticated global systems now. I feel a little sorry sometimes for, when I look at, I love Brighton because I just love Brighton. I love the town, and I love the club, and I hope they come up this year. It's a real disadvantage not having that scouting system in place, and they can't do from where they are. So I think clubs like that need that extra 2-3 years to be in the Premier League to get their systems working and to know the agents around the game, because the senior agents now are the ones controlling a lot of player movements, and the clubs just have to do that. And Arsene's got that connection. And that's one of the reasons why consistently he's found good players. He doesn't make too many mistakes when he buys his players.
Do you reckon on Arsenal? Well, I know you know him personally, and you may not know what. But do you reckon he's going to stay, or do you reckon he'll go? If he won, there's been I was chatting to a fan last week, and he said, I reckon Robbie, even if he won, he'd go because he might want to go out on a high. Or I mean, you know him. What do you think he'll do?
I'd like to think he'll stay. You look around, some people who don't want him to go, you look around and I think you have to be careful what you wish for. I think you'd have to dismantle that whole system. We saw what happened at Manchester United. I know perhaps their second appointee wasn't quite as effective as they thought he was going to be, but they lost their chief executive, they lost their head coach, they lost their manager. And it takes time to re-engender. I mean, we don't even know whether Jose is going to make it happen anyway. It's an interesting character. But I think if Arsenal won the league this year, which we may or may not do, but that may be tempting for him to quit while he's ahead. But he's been ahead for so many years. My guess is he'll do one more 2 year contract. That's what I think at this sitting here at Christmas 16, and prove me wrong at Easter 17 maybe.
Guess what's back? Back again. It's Transfer Daily. Back on the 1st of January, we break down all the Arsenal transfer rumours right here for the whole month of January, throughout the January transfer window. So make sure you check it out here on ArsenalFanTV. We are back.